Good afternoon folks, welcome to Barcelona and welcome to the global press launch of Royal Enfield's new Guerrilla 450. So what is the Guerrilla 450? Well, it is an evolution of the Royal Enfield Himalayan 450 that utilises that same 450cc or 452cc Sherpa engine. It isn't the same though. As you can see, it's a very different style of bike. So this is set up to be an out and out roadster, not a scrambler as such. So it's had a lot of modifications from the Himalayan platform to make it into this bike. So the frame looks very similar, but it's not quite the same. So from about here forwards, it's basically all new, and the subframe mounting points are also different on the Guerrilla than they are on the Himalayan. It's got much steeper rake, so we've got 21.7 degrees of rake at the front end, which is a lot more aggressive than you get on the Himalayan, but it has got that aggressive front end to give you a bit of agility and a bit of nice composure when you are in the corners. The engine, internally and the external architecture of the engine, is basically the same as the Himalayan 450. So we've got 40 horsepower and we've got 40 Newton meters of torque as well. So grunty in the mid-range with a nice little rush to the top, and it's got a nice sort of chunky delivery that you only get from a single cylinder engine. Other changes for this bike, we have got different suspension, obviously. So we've got non-adjustable cartridge forks from Showa at the front, and we've got a gas pressurized monoshock horizontally mounted at the rear. This is a progressive linkage on this one, which really changes the dynamics of that suspension as it moves through the travel. The front suspension as well, obviously got much less travel on this one. I did question Royal Enfield as to why it hasn't got USD forks, because I mean, there's quite a few of the bikes in the segment that this is going into that have got USD forks. It's definitely something people do like to see, and they said it came down to the fact that they wanted to keep a modern looking bike with a bit of a retro feel, so they went to the cartridge forks. I don't actually believe that. I think it's probably more to do with costs of the parts and keeping it at a really competitive price point. So that's basically it. I mean, that is the new Guerrilla 450. It's a funky looking, slightly more modern take on the retro theme than you get from the likes of the Triumph Speed 400. And while I'm talking about the Speed 400, this is really the segment that this bike is diving headfirst into. So Triumph have just brought out the Speed 400 and the Scrambler 400X, so this is really going to be going toe-to-toe with them. But it's also going to be going toe-to-toe with more modern offerings from the likes of KTM with the 390 Duke, and also things like the Yamaha MT-03. So that is a really, really busy little sector of A2 bikes, and they're the kind of bikes that you look to if you're stepping up from a 125 on a CBT and you're looking to get onto a big bike. These are the kind of the bikes you jump to if you don't want to jump straight from a 125 to a 600 or a 750. So while you're watching some video of me whizzing around the hills above Barcelona, I'm going to take you through the price, as handily we didn't know that when we were actually at the launch. So in the UK, the bike will start at £4,850, and that is for the smoked silver bike, which rises to £4,995 for either the gold dip or the RD250 alike player black bike. The yellow ribbon bike, which is the one you can see ridden by moi in most of these shots, and the Brava blue bike, which is the white tank with the blue stripes, both come in at £5,050. So comparing that to the competition, in base trim at least, the Guerrilla 450 is cheaper than the £5,195 Speed 400 and the £5,699 390 Duke. The Triumph, though, is a slightly more mature looking machine with a level of fit, finishing and detailing that is very, very hard to beat, while the KTM offers a level of electronic technology that you only really find on much bigger and more expensive machines. So the question of which one to buy really comes down to whether you want a sweet looking and handling bike with very few frills, a gorgeous looking retro naked from the biggest name in the business, or an electronically advanced Austrian with a more bad boy image. Good afternoon folks, right there we have it. We are back at the W Hotel in Barcelona, right in front of the sea. I love this city. You can't get a city that's got better beaches, mountains, culture, food and motorcycles. Lots and lots of motorcycles, and we have threaded our way through Barcelona to get back here. The temperature gauge on my bike was showing 42 degrees at one point when we were stuck in, you know, mid-afternoon Barcelona traffic. It was the hottest I've ever been on a motorcycle, but it has been a very revealing ride on the little Guerrilla 450. So I've really told you everything that you needed to know, or that you might have been wondering about this bike in terms of how it evolved and how it came about and its specs and features. So now I'm going to tell you how it is to ride, and I'm going to start with the engine, which you might think is a little bit strange, as earlier on I told you basically everything was the same. Everything is the same externally and internally, but there are some changes to the tuning that affect the way the engine feels and the way that it drives. So one gripe that I had of the Himalayan when I rode it in the Himalayas was the throttle connection was a little bit snatchy. Could be a little bit grabby, and picking up the throttle mid-corner out of a slow corner, especially first or second gear, could feel a little bit clumsy. That seems much better on this bike, and I've spoken to Royal Enfield's engineers and they've said that there's probably 3 things that have happened that have improved the throttle connection on the Guerrilla. First and foremost, we are not at 10,000 feet here. We're not in the middle of the Himalayas. As you can see, I'm about 20 feet above sea level. So the air pressure, the air density is optimum for an internal combustion engine. Secondly, the engine management system of this bike, the ECU, is very different to the one found on the Himalayan. So it's been tuned for a sportier ride and a more sporty type of motorcycle. The third and final thing that has changed is the final drive ratio to the rear wheel. So it's got a couple of teeth changed at the rear sprocket, although the wheel sizes kind of nullify, or they even out that change, so that at the engine speed you're doing the same speed as you would on the Himalayan. That I think has also probably had a little effect, but that is one thing that I noticed about the bike that I thought had improved over the Himalayan. The character of the engine is still great. It's got this really nice fizzy sort of character to it. It's revvy at the top, it's got decent mid-range, it's very, very tractable. You can leave yourself a gear higher than you need to be, and the engine will chug. It will let you know that it's a little bit unhappy, but it will always pull through that, and it will get you out of that little area of chugginess, and it will take you on, and then the mid-range torque and then the peak power will start to pick up and carry you off down the road, which is absolutely brilliant. Another good point of it is the gearbox, and I found this on the Himalayan. The gearbox on this is absolutely brilliant. You can almost crash through the gears on the way down without having to blip the throttle. So obviously it's much more sympathetic to blip the throttle when you're coming down the box or up the box. But yeah, it's really, really accurate. It's a very nice little gearbox to use. It's not got a really long throw. It's not got a slushy feel. Feels very nice and direct. I like that a lot. You've got a slipper clutch in there. The clutch feel is light. The reach to the clutch lever is a little bit long though. So smaller riders, you might just want to sit on it and make sure that you're happy with that, because neither the brake nor the clutch lever are span adjustable. They are set as they are. Are there any bad points about the engine? I'm going to say no, but that doesn't mean it's perfect. There are some things that I'd change, but I wouldn't call them particularly bad points. These are kind of, it's my opinion of the engine and my personal preference as to how I would prefer it. The one thing that I would prefer, and this isn't particularly to do with the engine, it's more to do with the gearbox, is I would prefer a slightly taller first gear. First gear on this bike and the Himalayan is pretty much redundant. The thing will pull away in second without any problem whatsoever. I just feel that I would rather let go of a bit of that initial really short first gear. I'd rather go for a taller first gear and then just gain a little bit of more easygoing cruising in 6th gear at the top end, because you can kind of pass that advantage down the ratios as you go. Other than that though, it's a great little motor. I said it's got a fizzy feeling. Don't think that that means that it's vibey. I'll come on to the comfort in a bit, but it's not vibey at all whatsoever. So I'm going to move on. I'm going to talk very quickly about the chassis, because this is one thing that has struck me when we've been riding it. The standout feature of the Guerrilla 450 is its chassis and the way that it handles. It is an absolute gem of a bike to ride, and I didn't really expect it to be quite as good as it is. The Showa suspension is an absolute star of the show. So I know it's not USD, I know it's not adjustable, but you can kind of put that out of your head because there's other stuff in this category that isn't adjustable. So it's not a given in this sector that you're going to get adjustable suspension, despite the fact that a couple of people do. It is brilliantly set up suspension, and all the credit of that has to go to Royal Enfield's design and engineering team. They've got a massive testing facility out here in Spain, which has got numerous tracks and different layouts on it, and they've got a technology centre right next door. So what they can do is they can set a bike up, build a suspension setting for it, and they can send it out on the track. And because they've always got this kind of nice weather, it's always the same weather, always the same rider, always the same track, and they can test the bike in that really, really tightly controlled environment. They can download all the data from the bike, and then they can see where they need to improve it to get the kind of bike that they need, and they can send the rider out again. This suspension is totally the result of all of that hard work, because it is absolutely bloody brilliant. It's got a real sort of nice nice compliant feeling over bumps and potholes, but when you push on, it just gets better and better and better, and the harder you push it, the more the chassis starts to come to you. And I didn't expect that. It never once feels crashy over bumps, or if you've got roots growing up through the road, it doesn't feel crashy whatsoever, which is that's a real credit to Royal Enfield's engineers, because they've pulled off an absolute trick there. Another thing that it loves is fast direction changes, left to right. You can change direction very quickly, and normally what will happen on a bike, if you've got fairly budget suspension and a fairly budget chassis setup, when you reach the vertical point and you're about to start tipping over to the left or to the right, and you're at that vertical point, the bike will start tying itself in knots, because the suspension will extend all the way to the end of its travel. It's got nowhere to go and it doesn't know what to do, and that's when you get the bike tying itself in knots. This doesn't do that. It's really solid on those fast direction changes, and because you've got a long wheelbase, 40 millimeters, and it's got a steep angle, quite an aggressive angle of rake, you've got composure from the longer wheelbase, and you've got agility from the rake at the front, which is quite aggressive, and you've got this composure when you're changing direction and making fast direction changes, which just makes it an absolute gem. I don't think in this lightweight A2 sector of single cylinder bikes that are out there, so the Speed 400, KTM's 390, the Husqvarna 401 Svart Pillen, I don't think there's anything that could hold a candle to this in terms of getting it on a twisted road and just riding the wheels off the thing. Yes, others have got more electronics, or they've got probably slightly more power from the engine, or they've probably got a little bit more refinement elsewhere throughout the bike, but this one is the one that you want to get if you're a rider and you really want a very, very sweet handling bike. So that is one thing that has completely blown me away. Braking system, obviously we've got these kind of budget Royal Enfield bikes, they all kind of come with the bi-brace system, which when it arrived nobody really knew what it was. Now we've found out it's a subsidiary of Brembo, and the quality of the componentry is really very good. You've got a single disc and 330mm at the front, and 2-piston sliding rear caliper at the back. Like every Royal Enfield, the back brake is super strong, which is great around town. And also if you're out and you're going through some fast sweepers, what you can do is pick up both the brakes at once, and the bike just hunkers down on its suspension nicely and just tucks into the corner, grips and goes, which is a great way to ride it. It's really rewarding to get into both the brakes as you're going into the apex of the corner, and you can just feel the bike really hunker down and start to work for you. The one thing I will say, the ABS on this bike is non-adjustable. You can't turn it off, unlike the Himalayan, which you can. That is an adventure bike. This isn't. Not designed to be a scrambler or a street scrambler or anything like that. But you can still, actually, even on the ABS, get the rear end of the bike sliding into corners just on the ABS system alone, which is a lot of fun, and I'm an idiot and I enjoy doing that sort of stuff. The only thing that's missing from the braking system for me is span adjustable levers. It's a bit of an ask at this price point, but there are others that get it, so it is a bit of a reach to that front brake lever, and if you've got smaller hands like me, you might want to keep an eye on that. Going to talk very quickly about the comfort and ergonomics, because obviously that has changed. I mean, when you look at this bike, it's hard to tell that there's anything Himalayan in there, but actually there's quite a lot of the frame, quite a lot of the swing arm, and obviously the engine that are all shared with the Himi, but then you look at it and it's a completely different profile, completely different silhouette. So the pegs on this bike have come up and they've gone back. The bars have obviously dropped and they're nice and wide, so they're an easy reach, and the riding position is very easy going. It's obviously more weight over the front wheel than you get with the Himalayan, but that's not to say that it's aggressive in any way, shape or form. It's actually very, very relaxed. I thought we'd run into massive problems with regards to ground clearance. We rode the Hunter 350 in Bangkok a couple of years ago, and I know it's not a direct relation of this bike, but it's a similar style. It's a kind of an urban roadster, for want of a better phrase. The Hunter grinds its foot pegs when it's on the side stand. It's got really low ground clearance. This, you can still touch the pegs down, but you have to go a really long way, right to the limit of where you would actually want to take the bike in a corner to get the pegs to actually touch the tarmac, which is quite nice. They've brought them up enough so that they're nice and tucked out of the way. Overall though, the comfort level is very good. Like I said earlier, the engine's got a fizzy character, but you don't get any of that translated through to you as the rider. You don't get too much through the seat, you don't get too much through the pegs either, and the bars remain fairly vibe free. If you're one of those riders that grips the tank with your thighs, you will get a bit of vibration through there, but it's coming through the chassis. There really isn't a lot that you can do about that. So on that front, we've had a really long day. We've not done huge miles, but we've been on the bikes for about 9 or 10 hours. So that is a long day. And normally when you get off a bike like this, a little sort of A2 roadster, you feel like you want to get off and just go and lie down and chill out for a bit. But I actually could have ridden on today. Had it not been absolutely sweltering, I would have carried on riding because the comfort level is quite good. They also do a slightly taller seat, which is worth mentioning because this is a 780mm seat height on the standard bike. If you're a little bit of a taller rider, there is an enduro style seat which is got a much smoother profile and basically doesn't have this scallop here, just brings it straight across there and then flows into the tank. If you're a taller rider, that's going to be something to look at because it's going to give you an extra little bit of leg room down there for you to stretch your knees out on. So there we have it, Royal Enfield's new Guerrilla 450. I didn't expect it to really fire my imagination and I didn't expect to enjoy it quite as much as I did. I knew it was going to be good. I knew it wasn't going to be hard to ride. It's not hard to ride in any way, shape or form. It's very unintimidating. It's very accessible. When you're a more experienced rider, that doesn't mean that there isn't things that you can find out about this bike. There's still fun to be had if you're a much more experienced rider. You can take it out on the road and you can absolutely ride the wheels off the thing and it never seems flustered. It doesn't ever feel like it's tying itself in knots and you can just go faster and faster and faster. And it's totally unflappable in pretty much every way. I've ridden a lot of Royal Enfields and I reckon this is probably the one that if I was gonna buy one just purely as a bike that I was just gonna ride and just enjoy on a sunny afternoon, this would be the one I'll go for because it is hands down, in my experience anyway, in my opinion, it's the best handling Royal Enfield that I've ever ridden. It's going to be really interesting when we can test it back to back with things like the Speed 400, the KTM 390, the Husqvarna 401 Swart Pillen, because I think that's going to be a really interesting fight going into 2025. We've got the new breed of A2 bikes coming into the frame. It's going to be a very interesting year. Anyway, folks, I have waffled on for far too long. I've been told you've been watching Visordown, and if you've liked that video, please don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you can stay up to date with all of our latest content. And for all the latest news, reviews and motorcycle features, get yourself over to visordown.com. Cheers, folks.